Aldous Huxley was a giant of 20th century thought. Yet, to navigate the physical world, he relied on heavy spectacles and magnifying glasses. A severe bout of keratitis in his teens had left him functionally blind for years. This severe visual impairment created a profound irony. The man who struggled to see the physical world would eventually write the definitive account of the absolute limits of human perception. He built his theory on a thesis by the poet William Blake. Blake argued that humanity perceives reality through the narrow chinks of a cavern, assuming the small sliver of light they see is the entire truth. Our everyday baseline reality is a biologically restricted fraction of the actual universe, a version of the truth heavily edited for our own survival. In May 1953, Huxley tested the limits of that cavern. Inside his home in the Hollywood Hills, he sat for a clinical experiment monitored by his wife, Maria, and the psychiatrist, Dr. Humphrey Osmond. With a dictating machine recording the room, Huxley swallowed 0.4 of a gram of mescaline, a psychedelic alkaloid, dissolved in a glass of water. Huxley anticipated a world of internal visions. He expected to close his eyes and encounter grand biblical landscapes, supernatural colors, and soaring cherubim. But when he finally shut his eyes, those grand hallucinations never appeared. He saw only trivial gray structures that looked like objects from a dime store. He realized that expanded perception did not require the creation of imaginary worlds. Instead, it would mean opening his eyes to the world already in front of him. Opening his eyes, Huxley found the miracle of existence within a simple vase of 3 flowers. The arrangement burned with an overwhelming naked intensity that he had never before experienced. He used the term istigate, or isness, to describe it. This is the state where an object stops being a useful tool for a human and exists purely for its own absolute sake. A moment of wonder. He became fascinated by the texture of his own gray flannel trousers. He spent minutes absorbed by the labyrinthine complexity of the folds, finding the simple cloth as mysterious and sumptuous as a vast mountain range. The spatial dimensions of the room became irrelevant. He didn't care where the furniture was or how it was used. He was only aware of the staggering intensity of its presence. Removing the mind's utilitarian filters reveals a world of infinite miracle in the most ordinary physical objects. Huxley proposed that the human brain functions as a reducing valve to explain why we are normally blind to this intensity. The brain aggressively filters the infinite mind at large, restricting the flood of data to a single thin stream of information. This lets the human animal ignore a chair to focus on finding food. But mescaline acts as a chemical agent that temporarily impairs this filter. It doesn't create a new world, it just lets the actual world rush in. But the loss of this filter comes at a price. As the isness of objects took over, Huxley's ego began to dissolve, leading to a profound alienation from human concerns. He deliberately avoided eye contact with his wife. Relationships, time, and morality suddenly seemed irrelevant compared to the supernatural tubularity of a chair leg. Huxley noted that this state mirrored the terror of schizophrenia. It proved that experiencing unmitigated reality without a biological filter is fundamentally incompatible with human sanity. To break the psychological tension, Huxley and his observers left the house and drove into the loud commercial world of 1950s Hollywood. Inside a massive drugstore, surrounded by fluorescent lighting and retail displays, Huxley began browsing through art books featuring the works of Cézanne, Botticelli, and Vermeer. Studying the way these masters rendered light and drapery, Huxley saw a pattern. These artists were rare individuals born with naturally porous reducing valves. He concluded that great art is a transcription of the world's inherent isness. Artists see the infinite in a piece of folded cloth without the need for a chemical to open the door. As the drug washed out of his system, the chemical flood receded. The doors of perception slowly pulled shut, and Huxley returned to his ordinary, filtered life. This closure is a biological necessity. To function as humans, we must remain blind to the infinite detail of the universe. But the individual who returns from that state carries a new, quiet humility. the memory of a universe that is far more complex than our survival instincts allow us to see. The mundane world we walk through daily is an infinite miracle, hidden from us by our own brains just to keep us alive. Huxley found that stripped of practical filters, human consciousness connects to what he called the mind at large, a vast objective realm of infinite significance waiting directly behind the doors of perception. Huxley recorded these findings in his 1956 essay, comparing everyday consciousness to an old world. Across a dividing sea lie unmapped new worlds inhabited by autonomous psychological facts, creatures as independent and improbable as the kangaroos of Australia. They are simply there. Humans have occasionally breached this continent through severe physical strain. This section details how medieval ascetics reached these states through extreme fasting. Dropping their blood sugar and inducing vitamin deficiencies removed nicotinic acid, a known inhibitor of visions, severely lowering the brain's biological efficiency. Today, modern chemical compounds like mescaline or LSD bypass the physical starvation. They provide a reliable, direct transport mechanism from the familiar old world into this uncharted mental territory. Whether induced by starvation or pharmacology, the breakdown of survival filters plunges the traveler into a completely alien landscape. When the valve first opens, travelers consistently report a sudden flood of preternatural light. The world becomes brilliantly illuminated from within, and all colors intensify to a pitch far beyond normal optical capacity. Mundane reality transforms into a sacramental vision. The ego dissolves, practical concerns vanish, and the observer is left with a profound feeling of timeless immediacy, experiencing the naked intensity of the present moment. As the journey deepens, the visual field fills with moving geometric forms. Over time, these pure patterns solidify into concrete visions of immense, jewel-encrusted architectures and incredibly rich, glowing landscapes. We can see the echoes of these states in human design, like the brilliant, glowing stained glass of this Gothic cathedral. Huxley argued that our historical obsession with mining precious gems and building illuminated spaces is a subconscious attempt to physically recreate the intensely luminous objects encountered in the visionary state. Across cultures and centuries, world religions have built their precise descriptions of paradise by drawing directly from these raw, shared neurological visions. But there is a dark turn. The exact same mechanism that opens the gates to this paradise can instantly plunge the traveler into hell. The blissful inner radiance warps. It becomes what the Tibetan Book of the Dead calls the smoky light, an oppressive, shadowless electric glare that feels entirely clinical and malignant. Instead of experiencing liberating ego loss, the subject suffers from agonizing hyper-individualization. The infinite expanse of the universe no longer feels divine. It becomes an overwhelming, terrifying mechanism. We recognize this negative transfiguration in the works of artists who endured these specific mental states. In this painting by Francisco Goya, the distorted figures and bleak setting reflect the hateful significance that animate objects when the visionary experience goes wrong. These states also produce distinct bodily horrors. Look at this etching of Dante's Inferno, with sinners buried deep within the rock. Subjects trapped in the negative antipodes frequently report this exact sensation, a claustrophobic constriction where their consciousness feels crushed into a dense, solid lump of matter by an indifferent cosmic system. Looking at Franz Kafka's Bureaucratic Nightmares or Dante's brutal Infernos through this lens provides a new context. These are not mere literary fictions. They are accurate observational reports from the negative extremes of human consciousness. This creates a central paradox. If the radiant heaven and the crushing hell both originate from the exact same mind at large, what determines whether a person finds a paradise or a prison? Huxley concluded that the mind at large is entirely ethically neutral. It does not judge or punish. It simply acts as a massive amplifier for the emotional state the traveler brings with them across the threshold. The descent into the visionary hell is triggered by specific internal conditions: fear, anger, and the heavy burden of a disapproving, guilty conscience. When these negative emotions are subjected to the intense magnification of the visionary state, the vastness of the universe ceases to be a marvel. It transforms into an inescapable, suffocating trap. Ultimately, the visionary hell is manufactured by the ego itself. It is the result of the self-conscious mind mounting a terrified, desperate resistance against the dissolution of its own boundaries. To navigate the overwhelming nature of the infinite safely, the traveler must abandon this resistance. They must practice a conscious, loving surrender of the ego. Huxley's analysis bridges pharmacology, art, and mysticism into a unified theory of perception. It provides a map for our most profound experiences. In this framework, heaven and hell are not physical destinations waiting to evaluate humanity at the end of life. They are dormant neurochemical states, vast continents of experience residing in the extreme antipodes of our own minds, right now. When the doors of perception are cleansed, the ultimate reality we encounter is shaped entirely by the psychological baggage we choose to carry through them.